Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an odd time to do this, but it's a Tuesday afternoon, and we're going to do a little THAT.live. My name is Clark Sell, and today with me I've got AJ Armstrong, and we're going to talk about some business, some mentoring, some chatting, and a whole bunch of other stuff that just kind of meanders through the conversation. Before we get started, know that I know we're a little late to getting the announcements out for August 3rd, but you can check out thatconference.com. We just dropped a new version of the website. We've got our tickets up for sale. We got some merch in there. We got a store coming. So all the stuff we've talked about in the past, I don't know, 6 months, I think. Some of that's starting to finally come true, but that be that. Let's bring AJ into the fold. AJ, welcome on this sunny, hot day. How you doing?
I'm doing great over here, man. My wife likes to not use the air conditioner, so the hot day is always a dangerous day in my world.
Oh, yes. We use the air conditioner quite vigorously.
Great invention.
Yeah. It's science. All right, so we're gonna have a cool conversation. I'm looking forward to this. Before we do, though, let's just start with who are you? Can you give everybody just a quick kind of intro as to who is AJ Armstrong?
Yeah, sure. I guess I think one redeeming quality of my life was when I was 23, I graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point. So that was really big accomplishment in my early years. And then I served in the military for 18 months, and I was supposed to be in for 5 years. That's the deal when you decide to sign up with the academy. And I ended up getting medical discharge for a knee injury. So I played football at the academy. I had an injury, and then it started to turn into a really bad osteoarthritis case in my left knee.
Okay.
So I ended up getting out of the military and an honorable medical discharge, and I tried to experience life as a civilian. And that was my big transition back in 2015-16 timeframe. And when I got out, I decided to take a job as a systems engineer, which was what my undergraduate degree was in. And when I was in that job with Oshkosh Defense, which is a defense contractor, I started to learn the idea of investing your money passively into real estate ventures. And my wife decided to start a fitness business, so we decided to go through the entrepreneurial journey. And as all this was going on, we learned so much that I decided to launch a podcast, and the podcast ended up getting me speaking gigs places, and the rest is history, man. So it's just been a wild ride. We've learned a lot in a very short period of time. But I don't know. There's lots of stuff about me that we can talk about, but there's so many fun things to share and learn along the way. So.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of piqued the conversation, or piqued my interest around the conversation today, because I think we've had some interesting crosses in life without even knowing one another. So yeah, we're gonna have fun. I'm looking forward to it, and certainly thank you for your service. I have been to West Point, or at least I've stepped inside of it once. It's an impressive place for sure. But
it's like Hogwarts. That's how I describe it to people.
That's a good way to put it.
I think actually J.K. Rowling, there's some rumor that went around that she visited there early in her years and inspired a lot of her thoughts for Hogwarts when she decided to write the novel.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's, business, you own or co-own or are part of 3 businesses, and that's from the outside of things, like, that seems almost crazy. Let's talk about time management. How do you pull that off?
So that's something I learned when I was actually at the academy, because it's just such a crazy busy experience that I learned that you could get down to kind of fractions of a day and be surprisingly productive when you could isolate yourself into one line of thinking for short periods of time. So what I did was I had a daily calendar that would stack up with, you have a weekly outlook and then a daily calendar, and I would pencil down to the 15 minutes of the thing that I was going to be doing. And then when I was in that 15 minutes to an hour or whatever the time frame was, I was just there. That's it. And I found that was, if it didn't get onto the calendar in a 15-minute block, it just wasn't going to happen. So it kind of forced me to prioritize all the things that had to happen. And then I got into the military and I got kind of laxed with that because the Army was a little bit more chill than the West Point experience. But then as I started taking on these different businesses and reading about productivity habits and stuff, I gravitated back to that old habit. So, what I'll usually do now is I've kind of automated. I don't write it in anymore, but I'll use Google Calendar, and then I have the white space in there that is kind of where I schedule, podcasts, or people can automate scheduling. I use Acuity scheduling so people can set up meetings with me, or I can have my clients meet with me, or podcast guests, etc. And it just kind of takes that all out. And so I just will show up, what's in the calendar, what's budgeted for this time of day. And I couple that with to-do lists a lot. So
Yeah, but even so, I mean, it's 3. Do you ever feel like you're spread too thin across those 3?
Yeah, sometimes. But I think that it kind of like evolved in a weird way. Like, you'd think of owning a business as being like super focused on a certain brand, but when I was, when I was working, and then you would buy a rental property, it would kind of generate enough revenue without a ton of work. It's not quite passive income, but I started to find out that I didn't want to be a landlord. So then I was like, somebody else has had to have this problem before. What do they do? And they're like, well, you can use property managers. They take 10% of your rent roll and you can send it out to a property manager. So I decided to do that with my rental properties. And that was a really helpful pro tip. Thing you just got to know is make sure you find a deal that can accept that 10% of your cash flow is going to be getting eaten up by management. Yeah. So you got to be able to cash flow that. So that kind of took most of that headache out. But I have transitioned property managers a couple of times. So that becomes busy. Like every year, it seems like they'll either take money from you or whatever. There's always a problem. So then you got to get involved. But I spend very little of my day thinking about those properties. And then other investments that you can use in real estate, like limited partnerships, where you decide to throw money at some other guy that's trying to develop something.
Sure.
And then that requires virtually no effort. You just kind of collect a paycheck at that point, unless they have a bad deal that loses money or they rob you or something. Then you got to figure that out. So I mean, it's just kind of like, it's partially passive.
Like, unless it's a bad deal, and then you lose all your shit. Like,
yeah, exactly. But when we're like looking for new deals, I spend a lot of time very quickly trying to consolidate deals. And I've been put on a lot of, there's like bird dogs and wholesalers is what they call them in the industry, of people that look for drastically undervalued properties, and they get them under contract and they'll reassign them to like someone like me, or, someone who's an interested investor that's still drastically under market value, but they get a little cut of that. And that's kind of like their value. So that's like one thing that we found is finding those kind of people that are doing more of the work and piggybacking on what they're doing. So when it comes to finding deals, I get automated texts and email distros. Then you just go buy the one you like.
Sure.
So that real estate thing's been relatively passive. And then I did the old-fashioned way with the second business, which is your wife just runs everything.
That's the old-fashioned way?
No, that's Marissa's Fit Boutique. It's a fitness studio that we own in downtown Oshkosh. And my wife had a passion for fitness, and I was a former athlete. So that was something she was really excited about starting. So I just kind of financed the front end of it, and I call myself a passive investor into Marissa's Fit Boutique, and just help her as she operates all the daily work. And she's the face of the studio. And we have 3 employees that part-time work, and it's just kind of a little boutique style fitness business. So as far as the amount of effort that takes, that was a lot on the front end, but now she just runs the show, man. So
you got it on lock. Have you found, with the recent or the currently active pandemic, that it's changed everything, or changed a lot of what you knew in the past? Has it lit a fire under your ass in some way?
Yeah, in a lot of different ways. I think it forced me to go a place that I was hoping to go eventually a little bit quicker. And what I mean by that is we haven't really talked too much about, like, I guess when I was doing all this real estate stuff in my wife's business, and then we got into Armstrong Ventures, which was like, it just started off me sharing a bunch of stuff with my friends about starting real estate properties and buying and selling properties, and how you could do it with like very little money involved, and you can leverage, etc. And they got really interested, and they started calling me all the time. And then like it kind of spread to my West Point network, and they started calling me, and I was like, how do I like broadcast this information. So I started a podcast, and then I was like, I'll do like some consulting work, and I can maybe put like a little bit of a technical flair to it with the systems engineer thing, and help small business owners, apply some more corporate strategies or more systems engineering strategies in their business. And then that's where I was like, I'll use Armstrong Ventures kind of like a holding company for these different ideas that I have to launch. So underneath that, I do consulting work. I'll do some peer lending every once in a while. I'll do like motivational speaking events now after the podcast, and then all the affiliates with the podcast just get funneled underneath Armstrong Ventures. So it's just been kind of like this catch-all for all this kind of like miscellaneous personal branding stuff. But to answer your question, when the speaking stuff was starting to hit a little bit in the late 2019, early 2020, it's right when COVID decided it was going to hit. So like I went all of 2019, as I was telling you before this, we were speaking all over the country. I bought this Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van that
Yeah, the big
it's
ones.
like awesome. It's like, yeah, the inside's decked out like a limo, and it's got like a TV in there, and we put a bed in there. It was just awesome, and we just toured all over the country and spoke a whole bunch of places. And I brought a video guy with me, and it was just awesome. I did it all for free because I was like, I want to make speaking a part of my business in some way. And then, yeah, 2020 hit. We sent them all this awesome content, all these different event promoters and stuff. And then they were like, let's do it. We want you to come speak. We want you to come motivate our crowd and fire people up. And then COVID just totally took the wind, or, the legs out from underneath us, because we were getting lots of paid gigs and really missed out on a big part of our business with that. So that hurt too. We also had an event planned, and it was just a disaster.
So then what? How do you?
Well, that's what I was kind of saying. Like, forced us into this like video production. I was like, well, what do we already have? How can we reach this person already that we've got? Well, we've got a podcast, and we've got social media, and people are just becoming more addicted to it with COVID.
Oh yeah.
And I use addicted because it's a problem in one way, but it's also a lot of people go there for an escape, to find entertainment, interest, education, information. So I said, how do I start making, I guess, double down on that, instead of, if I can't reach people in person, maybe we can just try to get them digitally. So we started investigating some more like production kind of quality stuff with our podcasts, and try to make more videos and go that route. And that worked pretty well because the podcast had doubled in popularity over COVID, which was great. It just wasn't where we were expecting to take our business. And that's kind of where we put more attention during this whole pandemic now, is start looking at, well, what if we made it less of a podcast, more of a show? And that's kind of going to be like the next phase of this. We wanted to look at investing into like a co-working space where you could rent and meet with local entrepreneurs, and then you could have like little event areas, and then also like a production studio. We have podcast room, you techies are all, all this stuff, where all the awesome mics and the awesome video stuff and the live streaming and the broadcasting, and then being able to repurpose that content into show, like mini shows or social media bits, all that kind of thing. And we wanted to set that up and set the framework for that. So that's kind of where we decided to take this now. And then as the speaking circuit picks back up, that'll always be a part of our life. But sounds like the eyes and ears are in the digital world now, so it's going to be, you got to get there eventually. And like I was saying, that we had to get moved that way a little faster than we thought.
Yeah. It's definitely it'd be interesting to see how things come on the other side. I mean, you're in Wisconsin, I'm in Illinois. The two states have been through the COVID have been sort of in lockstep, and then not really in lockstep. And so I don't want to say we're trailing behind, but we've been a little bit more on lockdown. And recently they just bumped phases, whatever. And it's been eye-opening how quick people have forgot. Good, bad, it's human nature, right? We kind of just want to be back to where we were before. So it'll be interesting to see when, not that all will ever be said and done, but where people's behaviors and mindset will not shift. I don't know, what will really be different at the end, because certainly stuff will be, but God, who knows?
Yeah, we talked a lot about that, especially with my circle of real estate investor friends. I'm just like, well, what does this change about the way people decide they want to buy a house, for example?
Yeah.
Maybe they want a large. There used to be this idea that I had with a subdivision one time, which was they had these bigger homes that had home offices in them. So for like accountants and lawyers, they'd have
Yep.
like a conference room and a
Yep.
parking spot, right there at their house, so they could pay down their house while they instead of leasing out a building. It's like, what if that becomes a thing now, where now everybody is working from home for the most part, and they want big offices and a conference room, and they,
That's what
that
we
just
have.
could be, yeah, it could be the way things go, right?
Yeah.
So it's like as a house flipper or someone trying to be on the top tier of what they think the demand is going to be, that's going to be something important to consider as a selling point. Is there
Yeah.
enough space to be able to work from home? But
Yeah.
yeah, lots of weird things like that about where this market's going to go and how people respond, and the political division and just everything has been a complete wacky deal, man. But
Yeah. Yeah. I've also been of the opinion that, back in the day, the suit, if you will, was like the thing you got to go to work. And, now it's almost, do you have a microphone and a camera and good audio and all that? Because I think the expectation will be you should be able to work in a different place as if you were there. So, you don't need pants, you don't need a suit anymore, but you damn sure need a good camera and a good microphone.
yeah, and my poor little 720 right here. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just like, how are you going to adapt with being flexible in all these different arenas, right? It was so weird when we were looking at our business. I had a lot of following online, and I was like, I don't like this. I want to bring this offline. I want to meet people. I want to work with small business owners in person, brick and mortar, go and walk around their shops and look at things. And then the COVID thing hit, and it was like just went backwards the opposite way. I'm like, okay, I need to go double down back on online because of how it all worked and
Yeah.
the distancing and everything, obviously. But yeah, it's been such a goofy setup, man.
Do you feel like, looking back, is there something you wish you would have done more of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I would have, if I were to go back on it, like late 2019, I would have focused more in on what we kind of come to the realization with now, which is like doubling down on the podcast, trying to make it more of like a professional production, finding a space that's more acoustically friendly and that has like interesting things to look at. Just all sorts of those little things to make a more high quality production, and look at it more like the people I was hiring, more of like a producer, more of a person that gets how to add, fun graphics and visually stimulating, infographics and things like that. That's probably where I would have focused more resources on than some of the rabbit trails I decided to take instead.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big commitment. There's a lot of person hours locked up in editing and all the things you can do with it, and cutting it down, and the gear involved, and tracks, and whatever else comes along with it. It's
Yeah, and I struggle with that too. Like, you get all this macro content. How do you repurpose that into micro content, right?
Yep.
Without hiring a professional video editor who likes to charge a lot because it's not a particularly exhilarating
Yeah.
hobby or
Yeah.
profession.
Yeah.
So
And it takes a lot of
finding the
time.
right softwares, and yeah.
So you said you had a background in systems engineering. Like, how has that colored your, or given a bias, if you will, to your business? Have you do you think about things differently? Take more of a, I don't know. I don't want to say technical approach, but kind of pragmatic engineering approach to things.
I think so. My nature is quite anti that. So I think that having a formal education in systems engineering was a helpful way of balancing a more reasonable outlook at some of my wild impulses, if you will. So that's actually why I kind of studied it. I was always like a really creative dude when I was younger. Played guitar, and like I thought about movie ideas and stuff like 99% of my day. And then when I went into college, I was like, what am I not good at? I'm not very good at math and stuff. So that's why I'll study systems engineering. That makes sense. It'll balance me out. That was my idea. So then I get out, and from like an entrepreneurial standpoint, systems engineering is kind of more of the it's like the transition from taking a market analysis or a market needs survey and transitioning it into how do you create a product or service that satisfies these requirements, and looking at it as if they are requirements, and trying to come up with the leanest approach to fulfill those requirements. So it makes you automate, and it makes you systematically process all these different criteria that could unfold into satisfying your requirements. And I think that was a really helpful way of looking at things from an entrepreneurial standpoint, because you're essentially coming up with the most efficient way of accomplishing your goal. And a lot of people don't have methods to understand what their goals even are. And the systems thinking, or the systems think, gives you that framework.
Yeah.
It helps you go through, the solution feasibility. It helps you go through with systems implementation, with the kind of the entire systems engineering process. When you look at a concept and you go to a more preliminary design, and then you go to a detailed design, and then you go to some sustainment and feedback, and you just kind of repeat that process. That process of thinking is extremely helpful for someone that has a bunch of ideas but wants to provide the leanest approach to bringing that to the real world.
Sure, sure. Has it become just kind of second nature? Or do you find yourself going back to, like, crawling back and saying, putting yourself in check and saying, I should be more refined in what we're doing?
Yeah, it's become second nature. I think now, early on, I would actually reference like college textbooks and stuff to see how I could make sure I was doing this correctly. I mean, when it comes to like just trade-offs, if you think of like an entrepreneur, a lot of people are like, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to start a business. It's like, why? And then they say, well, I want to be financially free. I don't want to answer to the man. I don't want to do this and that. And it comes back to, well, what problem are you solving? And that's, I think, the first question you have to ask if you're trying to design a system is, well, what's the objective here? What are we trying to do? And it's easy to get caught in the glamour of successful entrepreneurs and thinking that the lifestyle is really what you're seeking, instead of the service of or some kind of contribution to the planet, or to your people, or to customer base, or whatever altruistic benefits you think that your service or product's going to bring. That's one of the things that was helpful early on. It's like looking at, like, what are we trying to solve? What's the problem here? Yeah, yeah, it's got to be like something that pulls you versus pushes you. If you look at you have managers, you have, in my case, a wife that kind of pushes you in most of your daily endeavors. But when you have a business, there's nothing that does that. So it has to be something that intrinsically just pulls you and motivates you to a new level. And that's a difficult process to find, that I've used another systems engineering technique to actually solve that at one point. But yeah, that's a great that's a great question. I don't know. You talk to different people, and they'll say that they leave business at business, and then home life at home life. And we mentioned before, I don't have any children or anything, and my wife and I find a lot of uh, common ground in just kind of discussing our goals and our aspirations and what we wish to do in our personal life, our faith, our business. So the line is very blurred to me, much like it sounds like you and your wife's relationship. We talk about it quite frequently. In fact, when we go on date nights, that's sometimes that's all we're talking about. We're on long car rides. That's all we're talking about, and it's just kind of a natural, free flowing discussion, because that's something we share and we both care about. And we're both excited and passionate about it. And when it becomes a burden, it's just one of us might get sick of talking about something, and then you just go talk about something else. But I found there's not really any formal barrier in our relationship at all. Maybe there should be, but no, it's all good. I hear you perfect. You sound great. Well, here we go, guys. We'll ask me some questions. So maybe you can have the audience ask you some questions, and then you can ask me, and then I'll repeat them, and then I'll ask myself. No, but yeah, it's been a wild ride, man. Just trying to figure out that common ground of, like, when you're sick of talking about work, you're just sick of talking about it. But I don't know, I found a lot of benefit to being able to share both of our goals and dreams, and I actually encourage couples to do the same thing. A lot of clients I've worked with in the past, for example, just have completely different ideas of what they want to get out of life or where they want to go than their spouse does. And it's kind of a shame when you think about it that way. That I'm very fortunate in the fact that my wife and I see eye to eye on where we're going, because it's like a team. You got to roll with it, man. You got to be able to like together go in one direction and support and lift each other up, because you get knocked down and then the other one's there to help you along. But if you get knocked down and someone's going the other way, they'll pull you the wrong way. Hey, no worries. That's what's great about this stuff. It's just raw, you know.
Got all the shit plugged in and
I
ah,
started to get so overwhelmed, like looking at the production thing though, because there's like, it eventually becomes like almost infinite ways of doing something, and then it becomes very difficult to decide now which one do I want to use for like streaming or whatever you got to do.
well, you can ask me questions later, and I'll happily answer because we are certainly in this and learning every day, as you just figured out. Um, so I I asked about the business and the wife and being able to separate, in part because our kids are my kids, and I know you don't have any, but this is the home office. This is where we run the business out of, and the kids, are there. And because everything intertwines so much on everything, our kids have a lot of exposure to all of it, and they don't have big enough heads to necessarily wrap themselves around the bits and pieces of conversation. So, imagine you being your 12-year-old self or 14-year-old self and hearing your parents who work out of their house and, you know, maybe hear financials and financial planning and monthly planning and this and that. Like, what, how do you contextualize that, right? My kids, you know, think, oh, well, you got all this stuff for the conference, so we must be rich. And it's like, well, no, that's just, it was cheaper to buy TVs than it was to rent them, so we bought them. Yeah, but we got 10 TVs. It's like, yeah, but that's only a couple $1,000s. Like, it's not really a big deal. Like, it's just a TV. But in their world, like, holy shit, like, you got 10 TVs. Like, well, it's not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. So
That's interesting,
it's
because
go ahead.
it's like you look at, I guess, I mean, you look at when I grew up and it was just my family just didn't talk about money, and then you just didn't really know anything, because my view of what how a rich person became rich was my parents told me they either got really lucky with some idea that was like a business idea, you were a celebrity, or you just got money from daddy, right?
Yeah.
You inherited
Yeah.
wealth or inherited a company. That
Yeah.
was it. That was or you, if you wanted to, you could work hard for most of your life. You could put a certain amount away into your 401k.
There you go.
And then when you're
Yep.
59 and a half years old, you can be a millionaire. And that was it. That was how I was taught. So it's just kind of weird when it's interesting the other way the experiment could go in your case.
That's right.
Know?
Yeah, and I think that money conversation. I mean, we're completely diving off, but I love it. I think that money conversation is the thing that needs to happen more of, because you hear you just said it, right? You could be a millionaire, but in the grand scheme of things, like, $1 million is not a lot of money either. It's not enough. It's not enough to retire on by any stretch, because shit just gets more and more expensive, and whatever, you need, it turns out healthcare is really expensive, and you want to live till you're 100 or whatever, like, it's not cheap. But still, even in my kids' heads, like, $1 million is a lot of money. It's like, not really. Like, it's attainable.
I mean, you're a millionaire. You're still flying coach. You're still budgeting every month. You're still doing a lot of things that you think that a millionaire is just this end state. And I don't know if you ever do like the exercises where you try to like figure out how much money it would really be to where you could live a life that you want to live. And it's usually much beyond $1 million, probably into the decimillion dollars.
Yes.
People are like, well, I want to be able to fly on a private jet wherever I go. It's like, okay, well, right there, we're really breaking the budget, guys.
Right. Yeah. And your dreams just went down the toilet. Not only
but you're still even if you got $1 million, so you're still having a hard time to finance a house. Do you know that?
Oh yeah, totally.
If you don't have a full time job with some big name employer, you got $1 million in cash and you want to finance a house, you're gonna have a hard time doing that. So the bank even is looking at that like, I'm not impressed.
Yeah, hey, my kids are into one of these HGTV like Flip or Flop or one of these things where they buy a house for X dollars and they sell it and they're like, oh my God, they made 40 grand. I'm like, yeah, but it took them 60 days. So like pretty good margin, but here was the risk, and they're selling these houses for like, they're in California, so they're selling for like $700,000-$800,000. And I'm sitting there thinking, 1,500 square
Yeah, I love
feet
that
for
show.
$800,000. Like you got it, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
Like I'm not buying that for no $800,000. And what are you doing? Like what job do you have to afford a 1,500 square foot house or 2,000 at 800 grand? Like, are you nuts? Like that's a hella house
Those
payment.
shows, I don't get those shows, man. It's like I'm a teacher, and it's like, well, I'm a garbage man, and we have a $1.7 million budget. It's just like, whoa, what?
$1.7 million budget, right? Oh yeah, there was
What
one.
are you guys teaching, man?
Right, there was one my kids are watching where it had two ways they could go. You could either buy a new house, sell it, and buy a new one, or you could dump money into it. So essentially, what they were doing was rehabbing the house, and then taking that equity off the rehab and saying, if you sold it, you could buy this other house, and you'd have to pick. Did you want the house that got rehabbed, or do you want the one that the realtor found? And it was always like, well, what's your budget for a new house? 400 grand. And let's say the house is worth, 250. Well, what's your budget for the rehab? 50 grand. It's like, well, where did the other 100 go? Why was it okay to like have 150,000 extra to buy a new house, but you only wanted 50,000 to like rehab the one you were in? Like, there's a $100,000 delta. Like, if you have that much extra money, then just get the new house. Like, you don't even have to go through the show. But
What's the other thing? How these guys like? They'll just be like, oh yeah, we're gonna put like $30,000 into just cosmetics and some updates or whatever. I'm like, I have yet to. I mean, I'm not very good at it clearly, but like, I've yet to see a good rehab for less than $30,000. It's just, unless you're doing a lot of the work yourself and you're a handy guy or whatever. Some people do that, but at least up in Wisconsin, it seems like that the trade skills are ridiculously priced, to the point where it's like, you guys, should think about, if you're interested in anything handy, that is a friggin' money market.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Engineers getting paid $30 an hour, and you've got electricians getting paid 120,
Yep.
130. Why go through electrical engineering theory to figure all that crap out when you could just go straight into being an electrician?
Yep.
It just makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Sarah in the chat says $30,000 and 500 man hours. More like 5,000 after you've cut a hole through the wrong wall and busted a main pipe. And
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like that too. You go, it's just every day. It's just like, oh yeah, well, this is gonna be another $5,000 we didn't have budget, and you're just like, what? This is just like a reality TV show. It's just classic for flipping houses. It's just absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I think the thing, if we bring it back to like the business conversation, I think the thing that kind of came true for me was, again, you're in life, you always think about it goes up to the right. That's kind of how you're taught. You save a little bit, and the pile gets a little bigger and gets a little bigger, and then at some point you're going to retire and you take out from the pile. But then you get into running a business, and it's like, it's not that the pile gets bigger, right? You don't want the pile to get bigger. You need to spend it, and then because it's time, right? You're buying somebody else's time, or you're buying something to help you buy your own time, such that you can provide more impact. And so this curve it just kind of meanders like up and down, and you hope it keeps going like the meandering keeps going up a little. I think I'm going the wrong way. It's got to go this way. I'm going down in life.
Happens sometimes.
Yeah, but I think it's you're scared to spend money too, right? Like you've got to spend to grow, and that's an oddball thing that I don't think was ever really taught either.
Yeah, it was almost like the whole line of thinking or teaching, at least when I grew up, was all based on like monthly budgeting versus looking at value, looking at time. And one of the tools that I use to teach a lot of my clients is It's it's called time, money, and energy. You have these three different things you can virtually exchange one for one in a lot of cases to figure out where you want to spend it. And if you have a lot of energy in one place, you can use that energy. For example, like the house building. If I wanted to get sweaty and get in there and pound some nails, I could save some money and ultimately shave time off of our schedule, right? Because I decided to invest. But you're using your own personal time. So then you want to come up with your own time. That what is your time worth? And the mistake most people make is like, well, $250 an hour. It's like, well, would you pay someone to do this up to what amount before you do it yourself? That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah.
And it's helpful to know that because it really makes decisions easy on what to outsource and what to insource, really. But that's a tool I try to teach people, because if you don't have that number fixed for what your hourly value is, becomes really, you'll spend an entire afternoon tinkering with something that you could have paid someone $7 or $8 an hour to come in and fix, when you just wasted your whole Saturday.
Yep.
And then it goes the other way too, right?
Yep. Yeah, I certainly think about every minute of every hour and what the return is on that. And that's not something I did until I started running a business. And then that's a humbling experience of, who you pay, the services you pay, your own time. Are you getting the return back in your time? Yeah, when you're responsible for the cash coming in, those minutes mean a lot.
Oh yeah. And then you look at energy as well. And I think a good way of looking at energy is some things are particularly stressful for some people versus others.
Yep.
And how much emotional stress do you really want to succumb yourself to if this could be bought?
Yes.
There's lots of, like, for me personally, like tax season is just very stressful for me.
Yep.
Because it's always a nightmare. I'm not super detail oriented in that way, where I don't have everything organized to that level of detail. So it becomes very, very stressful to undo that. So I was like, how can I use money to solve that problem? And I hired a bookkeeper that monitors it all year, so it's just crystal clear come tax season. Then I have a CPA file my taxes. So it's just like you can spend money, and then the relief that I get from that is valuable because I can focus on something I enjoy doing, and that I'm better at as well.
Yeah, and I think, to add on to that, a piece of that energy is it can also be super draining. And then even if you got the task done, it came at the cost of like not being anywhere near as productive or timely, and now other things are suffering as a result of not just getting drained away. And and I'm with you. I feel you. There's a question in the chat. It says, how do you launch your own business and become your own boss?
Well, there's lots of
what you would say. I'm curious what your first thing out of your mouth is going to be on this one.
Well, there's a long way with this. So let's talk about this tool I like to use. And there's if you can picture a three-way Venn diagram, and and this is kind of what you can use to apply if you want to start a business, or if you want to apply this to an existing business, or if you want to apply this to like, what should I do with my life kind of thing. And I found it to be helpful in all those ways. And the first stab, the one quadrant, or excuse me, what's the opposite of, what's a tri version of a quadrant, whatever you want to call that, the three-way Venn diagram. The one of three bubble, the one of three bubble is this idea that I have in my head, or this thought or something that I'm trying to basically filter down these ideas that I have of how to start a business. Is it marketable? And is this thing valuable? Is this going to contribute value to a customer? Is this going to contribute value to the society? In what way is that going to add value to the world? Then you have this other quadrant, or trivent, or whatever, this other bubble that's going to be called, is this something that you're genuinely passionate about? And I think what I see a lot of early stage entrepreneurs do is you get advice that says, well, do something you're really passionate about with your life. And then you have the opposite entrepreneur that's like, hey man, I got really into this Bitcoin thing, and like I'm all in on this. They're not passionate about it, they just know it can make a buck.
Yeah.
And they usually toggle between those two. So the first is like, come up with these things that are marketable and that you're passionate about. And then there's the third piece of this, which is, I think, the most important piece, and that's, is this a strength of yours, or could this become a strength of yours? And when I talk about a strength, I say, are you better at 99.9% of people at this thing? And a lot of times people say, well, no. It's like, well, if you're not going to be that good, it's going to be very difficult to carve out a healthy market share. You should be very, very good at this thing.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So that's kind of the three-way Venn diagram that you want to look for, that sweet spot in the middle, because I think you can be passionate about something that's also marketable, but it might, you know, not be good enough about it to get it to be marketed well,
Yeah.
right? So like, if you're a musician, there's clearly money in music, and you could be very excited about playing music, but if you're not that good at it, you're not going to make much money as a musician.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way of looking at it. So and the same thing happens between strengths and marketability. There's lots of things, and that's usually where people fall in a career. They're usually good at something, it's marketable, so they make money and they have a career there, but they never really did what they were passionate about. And they go through a midlife crisis, and then they come, you know, reading all these different motivational books, and then just come out a totally different person at age 50. And then there's the strengths and passion side of it. And that's something that usually kind of coincides with one another. And a lot of people have those ideas, like, I really have this passion for Egyptian art, I'm a great artist. It's like, well, no one's buying that. Nobody, no, that's not valuable to me. And that just becomes a thing. So you want to find that sweet spot in the middle of all three of those. And that, I think, takes some thought. So if I were to launch a business or to start a business, I'd go through that exercise. And I would ask those three questions about some ideas that I would have. To say, is this thing, is there a market for this? Am I really excited about this? And I mean, is this thing a really deep purpose of yours? Like, to the point where, is it theological or divine to your level, right? Is this something really going to help people? And then, is this something that's a personal strength of yours, or could easily become one?
Yeah. Yeah. And a business, I always tell people, like, the business is just it's its own entity and a structure. There's a lot of, in some regards, running a business is a whole nother thing to deal with outside of the thing you're doing itself, right? And those sometimes get in the way of one another. You got books and lawyers and all branding and all that goes with it. It also detracts away from the thing that needs to get done, or how you're servicing others too. And not a lot of respect is given.
It's weird too, is like as an entrepreneur too, when you're like working in a company, there's kind of like core competencies. There's HR, there's IT, there's finance, there's all these like just huge departments of people. And then when you're an entrepreneur, it's like, okay, well, I got to put my finance hat on right now, and I got to put my HR hat on. I got to figure out. Now I'm the maintenance guy that's just scrubbing toilets. That's just kind of like, it's just, you have to do all of these things in some way. That's awesome. But then the things that you don't really enjoy, you got to just do.
Yeah.
You just got to put the work in and just do them.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And those things can add up. And when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money or any money to pay somebody else to necessarily do them. So you're the one who's doing them. And that can suck too.
Oh yeah. It's because sometimes you're not very good at it. You're not really that good at it either.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But if you look at like the great entrepreneurs, it seems like they're able to just get all of that done. They're able to be the master at all these different things at some point in their career, and figure it out, or at least have strategic partnerships, or find very cost-effective ways of counterbalancing their weaknesses. And it seems like that's one of the characteristics of really great entrepreneurs, in my opinion.
Wouldn't you liken them to the fact that they're just a little bit more vulnerable and honest about what they can and can't do?
Entrepreneurs?
Yeah. I mean, to take the great ones, I think they're the ones who also realize that they can't do it all. They're completely out there. You know, they're not hiding on things. They're very clear about their purpose or their intention, and have to fill in where they need that help. So they're constantly seeking advice. They're constantly seeking growth.
Yeah, there's a humility there, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I would buy that for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at people that they're very aware. They're self-aware to a level that they know their weaknesses. They know where they need to seek help. They need to know where they need to learn things. They're very open to learning things. I've found almost even entrepreneurs that aren't successful but are entrepreneurs are still very open-minded to learning new things.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of the very nature of gaining any kind of wealth or building any type of business brand, you've got to be able to see other people's mistakes, and you've got to be able to quickly maneuver through those. So I think humility is one of the biggest things I've noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on an hour, and I want to be respectful for your time because I understand it. But questions? Is there something else you want to talk about?
No, man. I mean, it's kind of your show. You run it. Like this has been a pleasure being here and talking with you and your audience. And I'm always interested in connecting with people and just learning about their journey and their stories, because it's awesome to hear, I think, different stories from others, because when you get into the story of others, you can put a lot of character goes into people's development that I think we don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's good to know that about others, so you can kind of shape your worldview and become more cultured. So I'm always just excited to meet people, and it's been very difficult during COVID to do that. So if you want to meet me digitally, you can always like find me on Instagram or something, or Facebook, and I'm always there to respond.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why we're doing this, right? Have a conversation that you'd have, at the bar or in the hallway, that unstructured, as kind of unfiltered as possible, to add some bit of value and some bit of context for others. So I appreciate you taking out the time to be here. Certainly wish you well in turning things into a production. That is, as you've experienced the challenge, no matter how good your internet or tools are. So
I gotta keep persuading my wife, though, to allocate a little more to the production budget. There's not always like a super high return on podcasting. It's more indirect,
Yep.
because it's just, you're kind of just building connections and seeking brand awareness, but it's not like you're getting a ROI per download. So that's hard for me to talk to her about a lot. But
yeah, I mean, we're strung together with a shoestring. I mean, there's a mic and a camera and a noise thing and a USB thing and a Mac Mini. There's not a whole lot. There's good internet. That's for sure. But the rest of it's pretty simple. It's not it's not any Lewis Howes or anything like that. But hey, it is strung.
I was trying to use a DSLR camera for like audio for webcam, and I bought this capture card off the internet, and then they said, well, we're so backed up with this, because it was right when COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
We're so backed up with this, it'll be October before you get your order. And I'm just like, oh, great, thank you. It's just.
Meanwhile, I got an extra one right here.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what mine's. That's what we got.
I'll buy it off you for double.
Well, now we're talking.
Well, that's business, folks.
Yes, that's how it's done. I just made $12 whole. Yeah, it's been interesting to see how it'd be interesting to see how things bounce back. You mentioned it's not going to be available to October. Well, you think about how easy it got to just buy stuff from Amazon, right? How like mainstream, you just go to your phone and flick it. And I had this interesting, we're completely diving off at the end, but it's good stuff. I had this interesting conversation with my kids because they had an assignment in school that was centered around like, what do you do in a time of pandemic? Do you need to hoard food? Do you need to make your own resources? Like, it was a really kind of far out there. And I'm very practical, and I was looking at my kids like, are you kidding me? Like, who is best set up right now to like completely conquer things, and is there anybody who's able to deliver food to everybody, to do this, to do that, do this? And they're just like, oh no. I was like, bullshit. You got Amazon, you got USPS, you got UPS and FedEx. Like, you could absolutely form an alliance where that said set of companies who already has the infrastructure in play, the ordering capabilities, the logistical network, this and that. Like, if you step back and think about it, these people are completely able to change the fabric of how we think about everything. And they've been doing it for the past 10 years. Like, it's all getting set up. So now you have to think, well, okay, you can't get this capture card, but why? Okay, there's manufacturing delays because this, that, and the other, and not being able to have enough on hand. So
Yeah, it opens your mind to like a lot of business literacy in that way,
right.
of like the cause and effects of all of these different business processes, and it just, yeah, it's a great that's a great thought experiment for a kid like that.
And everybody ran out about toilet paper. It's like, whoa, hold on. If we would have just kept buying at the same pace, we could have still had shitter paper. Like we didn't need to we didn't need to cause unjust. Just carry on like everything's just
I read
fine.
a really weird. It was like a behavioral. I saw a behavioral marketer do a study on it. It's just because it all it had to do with was during a pandemic and crisis, bigger things people thought were more valuable. And I was like, that's a really interesting thing to think about. Just bigger means more valuable to someone that's under chaos.
Yep.
So I was like, wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Toilet paper, man.
Well, and as somebody who just drove to Michigan, I was advised to make sure that we had extra in the car just in case we needed to go to a rest stop, because if you were in need of toilet paper, apparently you just strip the rest stops of toilet paper. So, bring your own, folks. Don't leave home without it anymore.
Yeah, that's America, 2020.
That's America, the land of free toilet paper.
For now.
For now. Well, not anymore. It's all gone, but maybe again. Maybe in October. All right, sir. Well, listen, thank you for the time. Wish you well. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And if there's ever anything that we can do or help you, please let us know. And there's certainly a whole, bunch of folks there, I'm sure, will want to kind of reach out. How do people get in contact with you if they want to say hi or thank you or learn more? How do they find you?
Yeah, I'm pretty responsive on most platforms. My website's aaronjarmstrong.com, but my Instagram is an easy way to just send me a DM. I always respond. It's Aaron Armstrong 33 on Instagram, and I'll be sure to get a hold of you there. But if you go to my website, aaronjarmstrong.com, you'll find all my social handles, everything, and it couldn't be easier. You can actually text me directly right on my website. It goes to an office line that feeds my phone, and I'll see that when I check it every day. So
there you go. All right, sir. Well, thank you for spending the time with us today. And for those who were in the chat, thanks. Nice seeing y'all. And we'll be back on tomorrow, actually, at noon. So we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, sir. It was great
chatting.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.